everybody, this is Katie. I am doing this video to help you with the Chapter 2 assignment. So you're reading this, you opened it up from Blackboard. We have 3 pages here, but there's only 2 questions. The first one, create a NAT translation table entry. And we are doing this similar to page 73. So here is the first question. And this is directly from your book on page 93. Your corporation hosts a website, and basically we want to set up the address translation table here that will protect the inside network from the outside network, because that's what network address translation does. So remember, NAT is a technique designed to conserve the number of public IP addresses needed by a network. Not only that, the gateway device or router that stands between the private and the other networks, such as the internet, run network address translation to protect our internal network from the outside creeps in things. So we set up network address translation on our router. This can be done on a Cisco router or a Linux server. And the example is a Linux server, so we're going to follow those commands. I will tell you though, it's pretty much exactly the same on a Cisco router. So let's go over to the textbook real quick. Now, in the book, this is on page 73 where you're looking. So it gives you this example and it gives you some text, just like our homework question does. And then it gives you these questions, so you have to figure out what these IPs are. So let's do that together. What is the router's outside IP interface address? So we're going to answer these questions in order to do this. That's what you need to do for your homework. So as an example, what's the router's outside interface IP? That is this IP address here, 6932.208.100. Because here's the outside, and it's the router's address of the outside. So if I just do a little notepad, and I'm making my notes to myself, and I'm answering that question, outside router interface IP, that is 6932.208.100. The next question is, what's the inside router interface IP? And that's the IP address the inside network uses, 192.168.50.1. See? Right here, inside the network, and that's IP of the inside of the network. The next question that it asks is, what is the website's public IP? And that is 6932.208.74. I'm writing these down here because they're going to help me configure my interface, my NAT table here. And then the last question is public IP. The last question is private IP of the active web server. Now, in our thing we have, if we look at the picture, we move this over here, we have web server A and web server B. That's B is our backup. So our active web server is here, and that's on our internal network, 192.168.10.1. So we've answered these 4 questions that are on page 74. You need those. This is our template, and you need those for when you do the assignment on 93. So now we're going to do our table. We're going to figure out what this table is. It says we have this design, and it says, okay, now we have to configure the network. So the first thing is our interface command. So we're going to configure interface. This is like we're switching This is the NAT table entry. And you have to do this for the assignment. So the first thing we're going to do is configure our interface serial 0/0, and we want to use the command IP address. And the IP address that we use first is the IP of the router, of the outside router. And then the subnet mask, and this one is 255. That's a class C, but that's a class A IP. Let's see if it mentions why we're doing that. We'll just use the default class C as it suggests in our assignment in here. So you're going to put, when you do yours, you're going to put the outside IP and then 255.255.255.0. So in this case, if I were to, this is my actual entry. If I'm running the actual commands, this is a real command, interface serial 0/0, IP address. This is just an example, so I'm going to comment that out like that. And my real line would be, my real line of code or configuration would be IP address, and then just what it says here, 69.32.208.100, and then 255.255.255.0. So you do the IP address of the outside IP and then the subnet mask, and then the next line is, what are you configuring? I'm configuring IP, network address translation, for the outside network. The second set is the interface for the Ethernet. Interface Ethernet 1/1, and then we're configuring IP address for the inside IP, and then 255.255.255.0. And again, inside IP is not an actual command, so that's more of a comment. And the real command, you just replace IP address. What's our inside IP? Well, let's go right up here. It's this one right here. And 255.255.255. I'm missing some fives. 255.0. And what am I configuring? IP NAT inside. So I've configured two things. Here's my table. This is my entry. Comments, things that aren't really code, so we're going to do that. Here's my table entry. I'm configuring the serial interface 0/0, and I'm doing this IP address on the outside, and I'm configuring the internal Ethernet interface as 192.168.50.1. And then the last command that you would do is say IP, network address translation, or NAT, inside source static, because we're giving it a static IP of the web server. So the inside source is always 192.168.10.7. And what website is the outside source, or what is the outside link? 69.32.208.74. So that just says, it states that the source information about the inside host will be translated so the host's private IP of this server here will appear as the public IP of this address. So anything traveling in goes to here, but it's actually pulling from the real IP of this web server, so it's protected. So both incoming and outgoing traffic exchanged with the public IP address will be routed to the host of the private IP address. So that is what is explained here. Now when we go to the assignment, bam, here it is, the same setup. The corporation hosts a website of the static IP 92.110.30.123. So what is that? That's the public IP address, right? The static IP address. So that, what is the website static IP? Well, that's 92.110.30.123 because that's what it says right here. It hosts a website at the public IP of 92.110.30.123. That is similar to this one here, our third one down. The public IP, that's that one. So a router directs this traffic to a web server at the private IP of this one here. So what's the private IP? Right here, 192.168.11.110. That's the private IP of the web server. I'm sorry, 11.100, not 110. Oh, I wonder if that's a mistake right there. The private IP of the web server, let me look at the question in the book. It's 192.168.11.100 or 110. It's got a mistake somewhere. Hold on. Not sure if I typed the mistake. We're just doing the thing on 93. Oh, I do. I have a mistake right here. Oh, no, I don't. 192.168.11.100. Oh, that's not what we're referring to. A router directs this traffic to a web server at the private IP of .100. However, okay, that's the backup. The web server needs a huge upgrade. See, keep reading, Katie. And will be down for 2 days. So we don't want to send it to there. That would be like web server A. We want to send it to our backup, which is this server. So the private IP of the backup web server. See, if I just read, I could see it's 192.168.11.110. Bam. Your network administrator has asked you to configure to the router so that it represents to the IP address, blah, 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 are redirected to the backup server for the website, which has that address. So we already know 123 is the public. The router's inside Ethernet interface is this. Put that there. And the outside interface is this. Put that there. So now we've answered these questions. This was the confusing part because I didn't read it properly. So using the example that we did with the translation table earlier, you want to fill out these remaining blanks. So if we're configuring interface serial 0-0, what is, you need to figure out, fill in this line and this line. So this is where you would use the IP address of your outside interface and the subnet mask, and then IP NAT outside, and then do the inside interface, subnet mask, and then inside. And then the final command for the static source, the inside static source. So it's very similar to what was done in the example that we just covered. You want to fill out this part here. This is a line you need to do. I wonder if I can highlight that. I don't think I can. No, that's not what I want to do. You want to do this line and this line, this line, has a command in there, and then this line has a command. Those commands are exactly the same as what you see on page 73 in table figure 2-17, but don't use those IPs on that table. Use the IPs of what we just figured out up here. Okay. That's the first question. The second question of the homework is managing DNS, and I'm going to let you do this by yourself because the steps are exactly listed perfectly in the book. It is on page 94, managing DNS, and I only want you to do steps 1 through 7. I don't want you to go and change your settings, so I don't want you to do 8 through 13. And I don't necessarily want you to answer all of your questions right that are in the book. I want you to answer these questions here about resource records, and I want you to provide a screenshot of the records that you cleared. Screenshots, I showed you how to do that and how to run the command line. So when you start project 2-3, you're going to run command, and probably you should run it as the administrator if you can. It'll work as your user though. And then you're going, and then you're going to go through project where you start on page 95 and you display your DNS. ipconfig /display DNS. You're going to flush it. You're going to answer these questions. Follow the steps directly, exactly on 1 through 7, and answer these questions here. And then the last thing, one of the best projects out of this chapter is setting up Wireshark. We're not going to do that in this assignment though, because I want to devote more time to it. But if you want to get started and you're using your laptop, you can download Wireshark. So read what I have to say there. When you're done with that, save it all, submit it, and you're good to go till next unit, which will do some more great fun stuff. So thank you. Have a great day.